If there's one thing that everybody seems to hate, it's this. Doesn't matter what game or character you play, doesn't matter if you're new or one of the best players in the world. It might just be the only thing that can unite every fan of fighting games. Hate nerfs, love buffs, simple as. And yet, while buffs are always nice to have, they come at a cost, even if it might not be immediately obvious. This is what we want to talk about in today's video, and point out why nerfs, even to your own character, are kind of a good thing. Before we begin, please consider subscribing to DashFight if you want to see more fighting game videos. And now let's get to it. Balancing a video game is not an easy task, that much is obvious. You have this monstrous machine in front of you, and even if you have the blueprint, there are so many moving parts. The smallest changes to just a single one of them could cascade into a disaster that makes the whole machine blow up. And now everyone is pissed at you because they thought the machine was pretty cool, until you ruined it. If you played any long-running multiplayer game, I know for a fact you have at least one example of this happening. It's simply unavoidable. We would have a harder time trying to come up with a game that never had balance issues. However, among those issues, I think most can be described with just two words: too strong, or with one word, overpowered. Some can even describe it without any words at all. Meanwhile, when was the last time you heard people complain about new content or characters being weak? It does happen, but it's so exceptionally rare. Developers want you to experience and enjoy new content, and it just so happens that people have fun using strong characters or powerful items and weapons. We like stuff that benefits us, and that's why buffs are always welcome, while nerfs are despised. And this is where an important nuance of balancing comes into play. It's easy to get an impression that the purpose of balance is to achieve a perfect competitive environment, where every matchup is equal and every character is viable, where victory can only be achieved through pure skill alone. And sure, that's certainly a part of it for any competitive game. But we can't forget that it's still a video game. Even though it might be hard to believe sometimes, the people who make these games want you to have fun. They want you to feel satisfied. You probably see the connection now. If the developers want you to have a good time, they are more inclined to make changes that players would enjoy. And there aren't many who wouldn't appreciate changes that make their character stronger, leading us to aforementioned disasters at worst, or at best, require several waves of those much-hated nerfs to fix. Of course, things aren't that simple in real life. It's never just nerfs or just buffs. But this is probably the most important part of this. The player attitude towards the changes, their reception, can impact the way the developers handle their game, and the overall direction of the game. Even if you always make 3 steps forward but 2 steps back, you will go over the line eventually. More commonly, something like this would be known as power creep. Through years of changes that comprise of more buffs than nerfs, and those strong new characters we talked about, the entire identity of the game slowly changes. Instead of hammering down things that stick out, the bottom line is constantly moved up. We can generally blame this for things like average damage going up, top tiers remaining top tiers throughout the game's lifespan, universal mechanics becoming stronger and more versatile, which can shift the emphasis from characters towards those universal mechanics. And finally, in some cases, the game as a whole can become less distinct and more homogenized, as characters become increasingly well-rounded and good at everything instead of having defined strengths. This is why nerfs aren't just good sometimes, they are outright necessary. It's still possible to maintain competitive integrity and overall balance in spite of power creep, but altering the game's identity is unavoidable. When a seemingly overpowered character comes out, sure, some people might have a blast using him, but do you really want every other character to be brought up to that level? Because while you can say that if everybody is overpowered then nobody is, the game itself is now way more volatile. I know some of you might bring up the good Guilty Gears or BBCF as an example, but those games, they sort of found the holy grail of game balance. Are the characters perfectly even? Hell no, but those games are still fun because most characters have both a unique strength and a defining weakness, and their power tends to fluctuate depending on how well you can utilize the former and compensate for the latter. It's a stark contrast compared to modern games where the well-rounded, versatile, and easy-to-use characters tend to sit at the top, while characters who have noticeable weaknesses can only be made viable by the most exceptional character specialists. And yet, those characters aren't exactly bad, and perhaps the Holy Grail could be achieved if the people were more receptive to overly well-rounded characters becoming more specialized through nerfs. Ultimately, there is no objectively right or wrong way to do things when it comes to game design. The developers should be allowed to make a game that they want to make, but to allow for that to happen, the community needs to be more understanding of the changes. Allow things to play out and try to understand what the game is going for. Knee-jerk reactions to nerfs, or any changes really, are not very productive and are often not well informed. But most importantly, when we ask for changes or react to them, always remember to take a step back and consider the bigger picture. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.